Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. I am Tony Gerdeman, here as always with Tom Orr. Tom, how's it going?
Tony, I'm freshly returned from lovely Findlay, Ohio, where I was coaching a youth hockey tournament. We whipped some butt in just a magnificent way all day, but that's not the important part of the story. That's not why I'm telling you this, Tony. The important part of the story comes on my way home this afternoon from lovely Findlay, Ohio, when I stopped in a rest area along Route 23, somewhere between Marion and Findlay,
Upper
I guess.
Sandusky.
Upper Sandusky. Yeah, between Marion and Upper Sandusky. Pulled off because I had a 8-year-old in the back seat who had been drinking a full Gatorade water bottle, and resultant events happened. And so we pulled off to the rest area to make a quick pit stop. And as I was exiting the rest area, I glanced over at the map of Ohio that is framed in the wall in the glass case, and noticed something at the bottom of the glass case. Tony, did you happen to see on my Twitter what was inside that case?
No, I did not. Tell me, Tom.
Okay. Well, and I will tell you that I looked on the other side, and there was a picture of, the governor of Ohio and the lieutenant governor of Ohio and some other, whatever stuff that they put in rest areas in another locked glass case. And there was an identical item slid between the panels of glass, protected from the surrounding elements within this, this locked glass case. Same thing on both sides. It was a photo of one Ohio State superfan who, Tony, would you like to guess which Ohio? I mean, there are so many to choose from, but would you like to guess which Ohio State superfan it was?
Tom, was it Buckeye guy?
Tony, I don't know how you guessed that, but yes, it was in fact Buckeye guy. Now, I mean, I don't want to speculate on how that photo might have ended up there, but I would assume that if you were a not just a fan, but a super fan, you may have traversed Route 23 North over this weekend to go see the Buckeyes play in Ann Arbor, and as a result had to make the return trip back down 23 following the game. Tony, I mean, would you care to speculate on who might have placed not one, but two photos of this one particular Ohio State superfan in this protective area behind glass, locked behind glass, for all that share Ohio's motorways to see, enjoy, and bask in the glory of? Would you care to speculate on who might have placed those there, Tony?
I think it could have been anybody.
Mm-hmm. That is true. Well, I mean, I can assure you it was not me.
Okay,
I cannot speak for anyone else who may have entered or exited the rest area, at other times this weekend. But I can assure you it was not me.
I'm
would you like to make a more specific guess?
I think I would narrow it down to possibly either Buckeye guy or also Buckeye guy.
Yeah, those I think are the leading suspects in this particular. I don't want to say crime. This particular sharing of glories with the motorists of the state of Ohio. Is that a crime, Tony?
I'm looking at the tweet now, and I'm looking at these displays, and the one that is they're all a little jarring, but the one is the one that you mentioned. It's got a glass case, and one corner you've got Mike DeWine. And the other corner, you've got the lieutenant governor. And then the third corner down here, you have ESPN Hall of Famer, fan Hall of Famer, Buckeye guy. As if, say something happens to the lieutenant governor and Mike DeWine, all of a sudden, Buckeye guy is now the Ohio governor. Like this is the ladder of supremacy in the state of Ohio. And these are the people, I guess, if something is wrong with the rest area, there's a phone number that you would call to reach some of these people. This is it's I would call this more almost a calling card, but it's as large as, is it bigger than a baseball card? Is it a 5x7?
Yes, it was substantial. It was probably not quite 8x10, but it was like a 5x7 is probably about right. Yeah.
6x9.
It was nice adjacent. I will also invite you to scroll back one tweet on my timeline, because it was an eventful drive home, because I stopped for gas in Findlay, Ohio, just before we left town.
Jeez.
And there was a gas pump at the Speedway station in Findlay with a sticker on it. Tony, would you please read the sticker on the nozzle of the gas pump?
Caution: do not insert in mouth or rectum.
Tony, as I said on the tweet, there's a great story there. I don't want to hear it. It was like, boy, this is somehow the hockey was the third most exciting part of my day today.
I was gonna say I think you could put an and or in there, but or is probably sufficient.
I mean, there's also a there's a certain, if you were to do that, there's probably an order in which you'd want to do that. But I it was like, boy, this was a day I had, Tony, and now we could talk about college football. Let's, you know what, that's enough about Buckeye guy and inappropriate gas nozzle insertion. Let's talk about college football. That's what we're here for.
First, I want to go over the caution sticker. There's already a warning on the handle, the pump handle. It says improper use may cause a hazardous condition.
Maybe they felt they need to be more specific. I don't know.
Clearly. Wow, Tom, you have had a day. But anytime, look, I'm from Northwest Ohio. I've gone up and down 23 1,000 times in my lifetime, so I understand that warning is there for a reason. Like, yeah, it's like, look, we are so tired of people doing this. Like the first 6 times we figured eventually it would stop. No, the only way to stop this, to make sure that it doesn't happen a 7th time, is to put a sticker on it.
It's like, there's a reason there's a hot coffee warning on your McDonald's coffee. It's like, yeah, of course it's hot. It's like, well, there's a story there. Like, I'm guessing there's a story there.
Tom, I think that's going to have to do it for today's show, because I just
Tony, speaking of things being inserted in strange places, Billy Napier may be headed to Gainesville, Florida.
Tom, back to this gas nozzle. Now I'm just going back to, like, it was 1,000,000 to 1 shot, Doc. I mean, is that where we are right now?
That was exactly Marcus Hartman's reply on Twitter. So yeah, I think that was in fact the correct response.
Okay. Yes. What was this about Billy Napier, Tom? I'm lost.
Yes, Billy Napier has been inserted allegedly into the Florida Gators job. He's
Chomp.
Yeah, and he's an interesting choice, because he's someone who has turned down other SEC gigs before, and I mean, you would think he was at Louisiana Lafayette earlier, and he was someone who had some pretty good success there, and 39-12 as head coach there. And the Raging Cajuns are one of those teams that was like always good but never great before he got there. Like, I feel like they played in the New Orleans Bowl on December 19th, like 3 out of 4 years for about 15 years. Like, they were always like 7-5 and like just okay. And now he's turned them into about a 10-win team every year, which is good. I mean, that is significant progress over the historical track record, which is a good sign. Florida's a weird choice to me, because that's a real recruiting heavy gig. Like, Dan Mullen was kind of that guy at Mississippi State, and it didn't really translate to Florida. So it's an interesting choice to me. I don't know that I thought for sure he was going to be a better fit at LSU, because obviously he's been in Louisiana, and a lot of that job is just like, keep the good kids home. But that, we were talking before the show, there are some political concerns there on LSU's end that makes that, maybe not something that their boosters want to, swallow. And they also have some Title IX stuff going on, although there's some behind the scenes stuff going on in the administration of Florida that's kind of a mess now too. So neither of those jobs is ideal, but it's an interesting fit. I like Billy Napier a lot. I don't know if this is the gig that I would have pegged him for, like as a spot where he's going to be super successful.
It's becoming a weird spot, Florida, where you see only 2 coaches have really done well there in the last 35, 40 years, in Steve Spurrier and Urban Meyer. With Napier, he's got a history all over the South, and was receivers coach at Alabama for a few years. I'm just looking to see how he did recruiting in his final year. I don't see any big time receivers, but we know that it's not like Alabama was ever hurting. You have to really, really want to recruit, and not because there isn't a lot of talent, but because there is so much talent and so many other schools in there, with not even more than just Miami and Florida State. It's Ohio State, it's Alabama, it's Michigan, it's Clemson, it's all of these other schools who are working. They have to work harder than you. So then then he's going to have to work as hard as everybody else, if not harder, because this is a program that has let a lot of players leave. And shoot, this is the first time in however many years where like no Florida schools were ranked, and really it's feels like it's up for grabs. But then you still, yeah, you may win the state, but you still have to deal with Georgia. You still have to
Mm-hmm.
deal with, I was going to say everybody else, but really, how much longer is Alabama going to be Alabama? I have that question when Nick Saban is done. I mean, even Alabama right now, are they are they on a downward trend, or is this just a blip? We will see. But I'm okay with it because I mean, this was a guy that had been mentioned, and he's Florida makes some interesting hires, not always good hires, but they are willing to take assistants. They are willing to take young coaches. Billy Napier's 42. So over under 3.5 years
Yeah,
for him. Where are you
yeah.
going?
I mean, they didn't end up having to pay a huge buyout to Dan Mullen. That was $12 million, and it was $6 million up front, and then $6 million a year or $1 million a year for the next 6 years. So that's really not unmanageable. So if this really just flops, they can get rid of him. But this is one where it seems like there's potential real upside here, where this there's a very wide variety of, I think, of outcomes here. This could really not work at all, or not work to the degree that Dan Mullen didn't work. Or if you hit, like you said, he's 42. He could be he could be the next 20 years guy there if it works. And it's all going to come down to recruiting. And having worked for Nick Saban is always a good indication, but Dan Mullen worked for Urban Meyer, and the recruiting didn't work out very well at Florida for him. So that's going to be one. I mean, I don't hate the hire, and I've kind of gotten out of the grade this coach hire as soon as it's made, because
Mm-hmm.
there have been a bunch. I would have bet my life that what's his name, who just got fired at Virginia Tech, was going to be absolute dynamite there, and that Bronco Mendenhall at Virginia was going to be terrible and gone immediately. It's like, well, no, that is not in fact how that has worked.
The
So
other,
yeah.
yeah, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, and just breaking right now.
Yes.
Yes, Lincoln Riley to USC apparently is official or official adjacent right now. Which, Tony, did you hear the music that they were playing at Oklahoma State during one of the timeouts when Lincoln Riley to LSU was still being rumored?
No, I did not. What was that?
They played "Calling Baton Rouge" during one of the timeouts of the Oklahoma State game. It was like, oh man, that is some good in stadium DJing right there. Because at that point, it was rumored that Lincoln Riley was headed LSU, and rumored to the point that he directly addressed it after the game and said, no, I'm not going to LSU, which turns out it was true.
He didn't lie.
He did not lie. That's true. Tony, it's not a lie if you believe it. It takes two to lie, Tony. One to lie and one to listen.
I am pretty surprised. It brings about the question of, is USC a better job than LSU? I think there is less pressure at USC. There's still plenty of pressure. I think it's an easier league to win, and you don't have as many people vying for the recruits as you do in the South. Like, yeah, Ohio State and other schools go into California, but there's enough there. And really, if you can attack it better than maybe Clay Helton and past coaches have done, if you can attack it the way Pete Carroll did, and maybe that's what Lincoln Riley can do, then USC makes sense. I think it's an easier road. I think joining the SEC is it's difficult. This is almost like him wanting to get out of the SEC. Like, I don't want to have
Mm-hmm.
anything to do with the SEC. How far away can I get from the SEC? I'll go to Los Angeles. And so I think this is, I don't know that he's going to make as much money, certainly not after taxes, but I feel like maybe the living out there will be better. I know there's politics in both places, but I think that USC is just a little bit more, maybe a lot more laid back than
Mm-hmm.
LSU, and maybe just for the style, the quality of life, USC is a better choice here.
Well, you got a couple things going on. Number one, LSU, yes, is the place where the last three coaches have all won a national championship. LSU is also the place where the last guy who won a national championship got fired 2 years after he won the national championship. USC is the place where Clay Helton was on the hot seat from 2017 on, and somehow just every year was at the top of the hot seat list, and every year kept getting a job. Now, part of the reason for that is the fact that USC has had administrative turmoil and budgetary issues and all sorts of crap going on there that is like, well, our house is kind of a mess and we really don't want to deal with a buyout right now. But LSU is potentially looking at potential Title IX violations, which could be, I mean, that's one of those like, you're buying a house and the home inspector goes, oh, I don't like the looks of this. Like, it's like, oh boy, that's not, I don't know what's going to happen next, but it's not good. That's kind of like active Title IX investigation is basically the college football equivalent of that. So there are pros and cons to both of these, but yeah, the pro is which division do you think is easier to win? The Pac-12 South, where you got to go against Herm Edwards and Kyle Whittingham, who's Kyle Whittingham is good, but Kyle Whittingham is also coaching Utah, which does not exactly have the local recruiting base that USC does, and that's kind of it in the Pac-12 South. And would you rather go against that, or would you rather go against Nick Saban and Jimbo and whoever's coaching Auburn in 2 weeks, and all the other stuff in the SEC West? Like, that seems like that's probably a fairly easy choice. Even though I still think you have a better chance to win the national championship at LSU, because you have just that incredible in-state talent that is just, you basically have to yourself. So I think LSU is still a place where, assuming they don't get nuked by the NCAA, you're more likely to win the national championship there. But yeah, USC is probably a better quality of life, better job security, and better all of that stuff. The interesting question there then is, look at all the quarterbacks, look at all the players that Ohio State has been pulling out of California, while USC and UCLA have basically been in hibernation the last 5 years. And Alabama has pulled quarterbacks out of there, and Clemson has pulled quarterbacks out of there. And Ohio State's looking at a quarterback in the 2023 class, Nico Iamaleava. Nico.
Even 2022.
Yeah.
Devin Brown.
Devin Brown, 2022, just decommitted from USC. Now it looked like he was very much in the running for Ohio State. Does that change now that it's Lincoln Riley, who has famously been, okay for quarterbacks to work with? There's a lot of stuff that could impact Ohio State here. We'll see. It could take a while to get fired back up again at USC. We have seen lots of hype at USC, and Graham Harrell was going to revolutionize stuff with the air raid a couple of years ago, and then that didn't really pan out. So this is going to be a little bit of a building process, because they have they have line issues and all that there. So this is going to be a process. This will not be an overnight flip the switch and they're in the playoff next year thing for Lincoln Riley. But yeah, that is something that's going to bear watching for Ohio State on the recruiting trail for sure.
Did you happen to see any of the video of Matt Campbell during senior day saying goodbye to just his players and watching them, and just the tears pouring out of his face? Because I think Matt Campbell is probably one of the first people that Oklahoma would call to replace him. And that's I understand Matt Campbell is different than a lot of coaches, but Oklahoma comes calling, and you've been at Iowa State for, I don't know, 7 years now, something like that. That would probably be very difficult to say no to. But then if you think about it, like, well, I can stay at Iowa State and be very much like, this is my theory on Luke Fickell as well. I could stay at Cincinnati, go into the Big 12, and contend for the playoffs on an annual basis, and really make something of this. And that's what a lot of these teams need. They need the lifer as a coach who's going to put their all into it and is going to remain consistent and build a program, just like Scott Frost. But like with Matt Campbell, do you do that at Iowa State, knowing that sometimes you're going to be 7-5, and if you're 7-5 2 years in a row, does the administration, are they starting to be like, Matt, we want to go in a different way? Like, do they start to think they deserve more? Do they get to feel like Minnesota with Glenn Mason, like, Glenn, you're not doing enough? Like, Or do you risk that even though you can compete for playoffs, or do you go not even just get the payday? Everybody gets paid in college
Mhm.
football. Everybody gets paid. So, or do you go to Oklahoma and you take that next step up and you realize this is the last job I'll ever need,
Mhm.
and go for it from there. So I'll be interested to see how, like, who else would they be targeting, or what do you think about the Matt Campbell fit there?
Matt Campbell's a weird fit to me at Oklahoma because going into the SEC, he is not someone who has ever done it with recruiting.
Mm-mm.
And I don't know if you can not do it with recruiting in the SEC. You can, in the Big 12, you're playing a lot of teams that don't do it with recruiting. There's a lot of Kansas State and a lot of Kansas and a lot of Texas Tech and TCU in there. And none of those are teams that are going to be in the top 15 in the recruiting rankings any given year. Oklahoma State's not going to be in the top 10 every year. So you'd be really asking him to change his recipe because I don't think, we're going to coach him up necessarily works on the west side of the SEC. So, the interesting question is if he does stay at Iowa State, as soon as Texas and Oklahoma leave, Iowa State is a much better job in terms of how hard is it to win your conference? It is not that hard to win your conference once Texas and Oklahoma leave and you replace them with Cincinnati and Memphis and UCF and BYU. That is an easier conference to win at that point. But also, how much are you making in TV revenue every year? Because it feels like you're probably going to have less money to work with in the athletic budget. So it's a better job because it's an easier conference to win, but it's a worse job because you probably have less money to work with and you have a lot less money than your sort of peer institutions and other leagues do. So, the question is, how does Matt Campbell view that? And if I don't remember what his contract status is there, I feel like he just got extended or was offered an extension in the last year or so, but I don't think it was, a crazy amount of money where his buyout was, unmanageable or whatever. So, is Iowa State willing to give him the whatever the Iowa State version of the Mel Tucker deal is? Like, if he does, then maybe that's worth it. If you just have that job security and you like it there and you think you can win your league in a couple of years because the Oklahoma is gone. But yeah, Oklahoma to me for him doesn't necessarily seem like a good fit. And USC didn't ever seem like a good. I mean, you saw his name linked to USC at one point too, and that never made a lot of sense to me.
Mm-hmm.
Where a Midwestern guy. It's like when people are trying to link Luke Fickell to USC. It's like, yes, but why? Like, what about Luke Fickell's life makes you think that this would make an ounce of sense? It's the same with Matt Campbell. Like, what about Matt Campbell's life suggests Mr. Hollywood? I'm gonna, now I'm gonna be ruling in the 5 stars. It's like that's not at all what he's done. So I don't that never made sense to me. I don't know if the Oklahoma things make sense to me. He just like he very much seems like go be the next head coach in Nebraska. Like that's the one that makes a lot more sense to me than Oklahoma or USC or somewhere like that as in terms of a fit.
Looking at the contract stuff, he's making $4 million a year. Got an extension through 2028. His buyout used to be like 9 million. Now it's down to, like, I guess, 4 million. So there is no buyout. But I agree. Like, I think he's happy at Iowa State. He can remain happy at Ohio State. My question is, can Iowa State remain happy with him? Because sometimes they start to think they're entitled to everything, and that uh, some programs like Iowa State, you win once, and you think you were born, you think you hit a triple, but you're actually born on third base. You know what I'm saying, Tom, right? You get the
I
picture
heard that
there.
I heard that somewhere this week. Can't remember where that was that I heard that very analogy this weekend.
Your guy wins one game, and he thinks he's talking like he's won three or so. So we will, Tom. We still have to talk about the games that actually happened this week. They were not. Uh, let's talk about a couple of them, because the ones that impact the playoffs, all of the conference championship games are set, but the Alabama Auburn game, which we were doing live stream during that game, and we had Buckeye fans complaining about the Ohio State coaches, and it's not like this at Alabama. And at that point, I think Alabama was losing 10-0. To which you said, like, go do a Twitter search on Alabama's coordinators right now and see how happy people are. And yeah, Alabama still comes out 24-22 win in overtime. And it feels like it would not surprise me if this leads to something more, whether that's a win over Georgia or what. But I do at this point now believe they have to beat Georgia. And I still believe they have to beat Georgia to get in, because there are other conference champs that will catch them. One of them possibly being Oklahoma State here next week. But any thoughts on any of these games that you wanted to touch on?
I mean, we've talked about coaches and getting fired, and Brian Harsin might get fired for vaccine-related reasons in a matter of a week or so. But dear holy Lord, Brian Harsin, do you know how to manage your overtime when you are the massive underdog and the other team has scored and kicked a PAT in overtime and you score a touchdown? Do you know what you do? Because literally everyone else knows what to do. You go for two because you're the underdog. And that means the longer the game goes on, the more likely it is that talent will win out. So if you're the underdog and you have a really good 2-point play, which you're going to waste 2 overtimes from now, you use it then. Because all you have to do is get one lucky punch in, and then you win, and the game's over, and Alabama doesn't get another chance to out-talent you and your quarterback who's playing on one leg because you don't have any other healthy scholarship quarterbacks. What are you doing? How do you not know this? Literally everyone knows this. How do you not know this? Tony, there's a lot of stuff with analytics that's like, I get it. Like, not everyone's going to have the same views on kicking field goals or punting or whatever versus going for it. I get it. Like, this is like basic bedrock dogma of college football coaching. How do you pay a guy that much money and have him not know how to handle that situation and lose the game as a result? Because guess what? That play that worked on the third overtime, the first time they had to run a 2-point conversion play, that was in their playbook 10 minutes earlier when they could have run it to just win the game. How do you screw that up? How do you screw that up?
Tom, did you see my tweet about Brian Harsin and what the win would have done for Auburn?
I didn't. Is it going to make me angry?
I will read it now since we are reading each other's tweets. This win would have been a huge shot in the arm for Auburn, but Brian Harsin is against those things.
Well, that's really good. That is extremely good content. So yeah, that's it. That is it.
Also, Ohio State lost. If anybody missed that.
I did like the man, that was a really underappreciated tweet from you. I did like the people on the live stream on Sunday when we did 2 hours recapping the game, asking if we were going to do a Michigan Monday. It's like, you mean the show where we talk about Michigan's previous game and what it means vis-a-vis the Ohio State game that season? I think we just did a 2-hour show on what it means vis-a-vis the Ohio State season.
I might just repackage it.
I mean, one thing that struck me after we went off the air is like, boy, as soon as Michigan upgraded its coaching staff and improved its talent in a couple of key spots, such as the interior of the defensive line and the offensive line and some of the defensive backfield, boy, all those concerns about how it was completely unfair and unrealistic for Michigan to try and compete with a team that had classes online, or how, Ohio State's win at all costs mentality was making it impossible for poor Michigan to compete. Like, boy, as soon as they upgraded their coaches, that seemed to solve that problem. I wonder what that might mean as far as the viability or accuracy of online classes being the issues in 2019. I wonder what conclusions we might draw from that. Tony, do you have any thoughts on what conclusions we might possibly be able to draw from that?
My thought would be that Ohio State no longer has online classes, and that's why the Buckeyes lost.
Well, I mean, Michigan probably went to online classes a lot with COVID, so I assume that was the difference in the game. But I mean. It's so strange where once you have a defensive coordinator who's running like an unpredictable scheme and isn't just running the same thing over and over and over again, and you don't get picked on, and you have the talent and the interior of the defensive line to hold up better against the run, it is curious how that changes things, even without a change in your in-person versus online class structure or the win at all costs. I mean, perhaps Michigan has gone to a win at all costs mentality.
No,
I mean, I couldn't say personally, but it just struck me as very strange that all of those previously unclearable hurdles were magically cleared as soon as they did completely unrelated things like hiring better assistant coaches. That's so strange to me. I can't. We should do 4 hours on this and try and puzzle out what that might mean.
I will say it was disturbing at times to see Michigan players lashing out at Ohio State players. I the gentlemen and scholars that I know Michigan players to be, that shocked me. I thought that was beneath them, but I'm sure they were antagonized, and really that's Ohio State's fault as well. I, Tom, let's stay in the Big Ten. Scott Frost in Nebraska, they have the game. Logan Smothers at one point was like 7 for 7 throwing. He started for Adrian Martinez, who was out. 7 for 7 throwing. He had like 60 yards rushing, doing well, leading 10-0, 14-0, something like that. And things were looking good. And then it just all collapses. It's like, you can just see it where, I don't know, the game is building like Jenga, and Iowa just keeps taking pieces from the bottom, and like, oh gosh, poor Nebraska, something is going to happen. They're going to ruin this, and because the foundation is getting shakier by the minute, and then Logan Smothers fumbles. They turned it over a couple of times. It was so expected.
It was 21-6 Nebraska at one point, and it was I got in the car. It was 21-6, and I got in the car to go do something with my son, and and I had the app, the Varsity Network app, which we do not get a sponsorship gig for or a sponsorship plug for, but I will tell you it is a fantastic app, totally free, and you can listen to live college football broadcasts from all over the country. So consider downloading that one. We were listening to the game in the car, and it was just like you could see it tottering. It was like, oh no, no, this is going to be bad. I mean, you have a 15-point lead, I think at the fourth quarter or very late in the third, and I was like, oh, I already know how this game's going to end. Oh, this is very sad. Oh, this is very, very sad indeed. And then it went exactly like you thought. It was like, oh well, they blocked a punt, right? I've watched and listened to a lot.
Yes.
Yeah, they blocked a punt, for a touchdown, and yeah, it was just it. At one point, they had 21 points without scoring an offensive touchdown. I think they'd had a defensive touchdown, a special teams touchdown, and 2 field goals and a safety or something. It was just like Nebraska just spent the entire season just inventing the dumbest ways to lose football games. It was like this really torturous psychological experiment on Nebraska fans. Like, how miserable can we make these people? Just the Yale psychological experiment from the 50s, where they you gave people a knob to turn the knob to, and they thought they were electrocuting the person or pushing a button or something like that to electrocute a person. That was like, they're just, poor Nebraska fans were on the other side of the wall screaming, except this time the button was actually pushed to link to electrodes. Yeah. Oh man, that was such a, it's unbelievable. They're 3-9. I think they finished dead even in terms of point differential in the Big Ten. So they were 1-8 in the Big Ten in their record, but their point differential on the season in Big Ten play was exactly even. You can watch 100 years of college football and never have that happen again. It is one of the most remarkable achievements, and it's like, oh, no one would ever want to do this. No, oh no.
Iowa scored 19 points in the fourth quarter, 2-0 for Nebraska. Had a 14-yard punt return, a safety, a field goal on a 36-yard drive, and then they had the 76-yard touchdown drive in the game's final minutes to secure that win. And I just, every single week they find a new way, and you feel bad, and worse and worse and worse by the day for it. Congrats to Minnesota winning Paul Bunyan's axe from Wisconsin. That was a bit of a surprise. They really shut down that Wisconsin running game. So that now leads us to all of these conference championship games. I'll just run down them, Tom, and you can go ahead and give me a thought on anything that you want. Pac-12 is, as I shut down this ESPN playing thing, sorry.
Oregon, Utah,
Pac-12. Big 12, Baylor versus Oklahoma State. SEC is Georgia versus Alabama. The AAC, Houston versus Cincinnati. The Big Ten is Michigan versus Iowa, and the ACC is Pittsburgh versus Wake. That ACC and Big Ten game are going on at the same time. I can tell you which one is going to be more entertaining throughout the entirety of the game. Now, the fourth quarter of the Big Ten game might be pretty good, but I'll have both games on and I might be watching a little bit more of that ACC just because I want to see something happen.
Yeah, ACC minus 42 over Big Ten in the total scoring department is my early line there. Yeah, I was looking at that and it's like, boy, you're going to have a conference championship game weekend with no Ohio State, no Oklahoma, no Clemson, very nearly no Alabama. I mean, Alabama could have, I think they still would have made it if they lost to Auburn based on a tiebreaker. But, I mean, and you're looking at a college football playoff potentially without those four teams if Georgia handles their business this weekend. I mean, this is ultimately, and this is not what Ohio State fans want to hear, but this is ultimately a good thing for college football because the same four teams making it every year is not good for college football. So, this will be a team. You will have a team that has not won this century winning the national championship. If it's Georgia, Michigan, Cincinnati, Oklahoma State, for example, or Notre Dame potentially. I mean, you could have potentially half of the playoff field. I don't know if Oklahoma State's won a national championship. They might have won one. They might claim a stupid one from the 1940s or something. But like functionally, you could have half of the field without a national championship since the 1940s or before. Michigan has not won an outright national championship, like a unanimous national championship, since the 1940s. Georgia hasn't won one since 1980. This is not a bad year. This is like the forest fire year where it's like the forest is like overgrown and like, yeah, the forest fire is bad if you live there. And yeah, it's, I'm sure Ohio State fans are real sad that their house burned down, but at some point, like, it's good to burn out all the dead wood and then, okay, and now new stuff can grow there. That's kind of what this season has been in college football a little bit. And it seems like we're sort of shaking out for that, assuming Georgia beats Alabama. And I mean, if you've watched Alabama, there's no real reason to think Alabama would beat Georgia, but I've been wrong about games before in the past, so I can't guarantee it, but it sure seems like you could have like a, Georgia, Michigan, Cincinnati, Oklahoma State playoff, which is wild, but good. That's good for the sport.
Yeah, this is a bad week for trying to be right about games all over the place. And I tweeted out that I don't know if like the way the current Final Four looks is the best argument for playoff expansion or the worst argument. And Michigan fans are upset at me. And the thing is, like, the argument against this being the argument against expansion is the fact that look at all of these teams that never get into the playoffs that are now in it. Like, so you don't need an expansion to get these teams in it. The argument for expanding is like these teams could get into it more often if we expand. So it's like wasn't necessarily a shot at Michigan or necessarily any of the teams, sort of, but like this is what people have been clamoring for because even before the season started, Tom, it was all you're going to take the field or you're going to take some semblance of Clemson, Alabama, Ohio State, Oklahoma, and Georgia, and it was like, oh, I'm not taking that field. No, thank you, sir. And it's just strange, Tom, that the one program that we can rely on that is stable and always there for us and never lets us down is Notre Dame.
This is a crazy enough year where if somehow Cincinnati looks bad enough and somehow they jump Notre Dame over Cincinnati, so it's a Michigan Notre Dame semifinal. I mean, there will be narrative aplenty there. I can't imagine it makes no sense to have Notre Dame in the playoff this year. Like very clearly, it's like, oh, they've looked great recently. Yes, who have they played? Because they've played a bunch of 8-loss teams in November. And the only even remotely half decent team they've played in November was Virginia, which was without its starting quarterback. Gee, I wonder why that looked terrible that game. Like the Notre Dame thing is going to go exactly the way it always does. But it's like, at the bottom three teams, I still would probably going into the playoff if it's Georgia and then whatever of those other teams you want to throw on the field. If it's Georgia and those other teams, I'm probably still taking the Georgia versus the field side of that bet, but I mean, someone is going to win a semifinal game, and Michigan wins a college football playoff semifinal game, or Notre Dame wins a college football playoff semifinal game, or Cincinnati wins a college football playoff semifinal game. Those are all kind of crazy thoughts, sort of historically, or at least based on the last quarter century or so of college football. So, that will be, fun and different, again, from a national college football perspective, not necessarily based on the feelings and emotions of the audience of this particular college football podcast, but in terms of a national perspective, yeah, that'll be fun and different, and a little unpredictability is not a bad thing. And I think people feel like, well, Georgia's back in the playoff, ho hum. Georgia's only made the playoff once. It's not like Georgia has made the playoff 5 times. You're going to have the entire playoff field with one. If it is Oklahoma State in that 4 seed, you'll have one previous college football playoff appearance between all 4 teams, which, again, that's probably a good thing.
Do you think, because at this point it's and Michigan is like a 10.5-point favorite right now. It's looking like, I would say, Georgia 1, Michigan 2. If Oklahoma State wins, I think they go to 3, and then you allow Georgia to have Cincinnati in the first round, and then Michigan and Oklahoma State just punch each other in the face for 4 quarters, and
bet the under.
Bet the under on both of these games. On both, I mean,
yeah.
They say defenses win championships, and we've been poo-pooing that you need offense to win a national championship. This might be the 1 year where everybody will be able to go back to and say, aha, I told you defenses win championships. And it's like, well, defenses lose championships. Just ask Ohio State.
I was thinking last night that, the funniest possible outcome to this season is Jim Harbaugh getting a massive new contract extension this week and then losing to Iowa so that they don't win the Big Ten championship again, haven't won it since 2004, and then also lose their bowl game. So even after beating Ohio State, he ends his season on a 2-game losing streak, like they seem to do just about every year. And then, like, by January 2nd, Michigan fans are already having buyer's remorse on this massive new Jim Harbaugh contract extension that they can't buy him out of. I think that's the funniest possible outcome for the next month or so for Ohio State fans. So I'm sure I've said a lot of things that I'm sure Ohio State fans found upsetting in the last few minutes. So I did want to share that just to sort of perk your spirits back up a little bit.
Good job, Tom. Way to pick everybody's spirits up after a tough weekend. I'm sure your words meant a lot to the people. Any other words of encouragement before we go? I think we've done enough here.
I think you know what? Let's cheer the people up by wrapping up the podcast, because I think we've done enough here.
We have done enough. Remember, do not put this podcast in your mouth or your rectum. Just listen to it, maybe in your ears, in your ears. And that's where it belongs. So I want to thank you all for tuning in, as always, and we will talk to you guys later.